the collective thought of every battered, bruised, and defeated god and warrior present. Appearing alone to meet the remnants of their resistance, our protagonist Kim Yu-won reports the death of Merlin, Azra, and Vishnu, solemnly expressing that after what he saw, he knows they have no way to win against an outer god. With no options left, Kronos, an existence that has the divinity to control time, steps forward, activating clock movement. Facing Kim Yu-won, Kronos states, "This is the only way for us to reverse time, and that as the price, I probably won't exist in the world you're returning to." Kim Yu-won, chosen as the last hope of the Lessers amongst the gathering of legendary figures. Wukong reaffirming that despite being the last to join the tower, Yu-won adapted the fastest to this world, climbing the tower to be amongst the first to reach the top and create legends by their side, obtaining divinity and a god title, standing as their equal. Hercules adding that as beings from the higher floors, their power is restricted on the lower levels, so it must be him who goes in order to change the tower. His friends giving him their final farewells, as in the past they will have never met. Yu-won then activating Kronos' clock movement with the fading thought of "it looks like I'll be having a hard time." Now in the past, Yu-won feels the lightness of his body without his former stats and magic power to support it, meaning he'll have to start all over again, when suddenly he gets punched square in the jaw, firming it to find a student from his former university, reminding Yu-won that he was a uni student before everything changed. The student throwing another punch, but now aware he evades the strike, asking for the date, enraging the student who comes forward yet again, this time receiving a swift chop from Yu-won. Moving on, he checks his phone to see it's 9 hours before they enter the tutorial. In the Hongdae neighborhood, soon to be midnight on New Year's Eve, Kim Young-hoon, the student from before, is chilling on the streets with his gang of friends. One of them noticing Yu-won strolling down the street with a suitcase in tow. Seeing this, Kim Young-hoon and his friends surround Yu-won, who simply checks his watch and says, "It's almost 12. Enjoy the remaining 3 minutes. It'll be hell after that." Myung-hoon, fed up with his strange words, stepping forward, only to come to a sudden halt at the sight of Yu-won and numerous weapons in his now open suitcase, earning the shock and fear of the student and his friends, as well as the nearby civilians. Yu-won, backpack on and knife in hand, booting the suitcase of weapons away, thinking this should be enough for the most populated area in Seoul, as the time ticks over to midnight. A deafening noise resounds across Seoul, with lightning, purple lights, and digitalized squares appearing throughout the city. A system window then announcing the beginning of the tutorial, asking them to survive the zombies for 30 minutes. Seeing a large group of zombies before him, Yu-won notes their quantity, thinking the large amount is due to the system settings that increase difficulty based on the population of a district to maintain fairness. Thinking of the blood soon to be spilled, the system summons everyone a basic weapon. Yu-won scoffing at the poor quality. The past Yu-won was satisfied to just survive, but now he needs to do more than that. Pulling out a capsule of liquid and pouring it over the blade of the knife he brought himself. Rushing forward and beheading a zombie, becoming the first person within the district to kill a zombie, earning a huge amount of experience points, and leveling up with a sly smirk on his lips. Continuing the trend, he goes on slashing through zombie after zombie, gaining level after level as he kills the horde around him. Seeing the slaughter, some people gain the confidence to fight back, thinking the zombie's weak, with a man running forward and driving his axe into one, but it's too shallow, the man screaming at his grim end. Seeing this, Yu-won thinks of how while zombies are slow and weak, they feel no pain and are hard to kill, not to mention their poisonous bite, which is fatal. After all, it's by no means an easy feat to survive and climb the tower. Striking down on the neck of a zombie, Kim Yu-won clicks his tongue at the failed attack, thinking the effect must have expired as he kicks the monster away. Then pulling out another capsule of liquid, breaking it with his knife to douse the blade. Yu-won, having discovered the weakness of these zombies to be salt, from an interaction he had with a salt farmer in his previous life, massacring the zombies once more with his blade drenched in a salt solution, earning him an unbelievable achievement, having just killed 100 zombies within 10 minutes, obtaining 3 free stat points as a reward. Free stat points are different from level up points that raise your stats randomly when you level, as these can be put into any stat you want. Kim-Yu-won choosing to keep them for now and use them later, heading off in search of a suitable location. Elsewhere, Myung-hoon struggles to handle a single zombie, getting overpowered by it, now completely defenseless. But before the zombie reaches him, something falls from above as the zombies collapse en masse. In the sky above, jumping from roof to roof, Yu-won dusts the sky with salt from his bag, leveling up consecutively thanks to the air raid, ending the first tutorial with 4,077 survivors. Yu-won then receiving his reward according to the amount of enemies killed, resulting in him being awarded 1,427 points, along with additional stat points, a bonus 500 points for the most kills, and an extra 1,000 points for an unbelievable achievement. Yu-won earning a collective 3,027 points, already level 16 compared to the 10 points he got in his past life. Thinking the second tutorial is about to start, Yu-won is startled when a lackey intervenes, announcing to all how to use points, since this is a special case where someone has already reached the threshold, explaining that points can be used to buy items beyond your wildest imagination in the store, or they can be used as currency, trading points with anyone, as long as you shake hands. The second tutorial then beginning with the creation of a multi-layered safe zone, and the alert that they will receive 100 points every 3 hours. Spotting Yu-won out of the corner of his eye, Myung-hoon rushes up to him, confronting him as to why he is heading away from the safe zone, and trying to suck up to him after seeing his strength. However, Yu-won brushes him off, telling him to go to the safe zone if he wants to survive, and don't act up. Rejected, he heads inside the safe zone, but trailing behind one of his friends is stopped by a barrier of light. At the disturbance, those inside then noticing the system window above, it stating the capacity for the zone to be 2,038, half the amount of the survivors, with a pack of gigantic earthworms feasting on those outside the protection of the safe zone. Meanwhile, with a clean slash, Yu-won dispatches an earthworm on his own, earning 300 points and 2 random stats for being the first to kill one. Unable to see them until they burrow out of the ground, Yu-won focuses in on his other senses, feeling and hearing the movements around him, instantaneously reacting to the emergence of one beneath him, crushing its head with a stomp before decapitating it, with a slash separating it in 2, leveling up once more with 3 stat increases, leaving him hopeful to gain a lot of stat points if he does this right. He enters the underground subway, as it's the perfect place for earthworms to make a den, and equally the best place for him to hunt them. Discovering the hidden dungeon Hongdae University station, obtaining another 100 points for finding it. Yu-won pulling out a second blade and taking a fighting stance with the goal of hitting level 20. Slicing his way through the mass of earthworms, a shiny marble falls from one of the deceased worms. Yu-won, now with the marble in hand, even more amped to kill these guys. Back on the surface, everyone receives an alert, having earned 100 points, and the system announces the red zone will be activated, shrinking the safe zone and its capacity, adding that if the limit is exceeded, a person will randomly be ousted, then pushing more than 300 people out of the zone, inciting panic as the earthworms appear to enjoy the feast. Myung-hoon still inside, declaring to all that from now we're going to choose who will be dying, singling out an old man and stating, "I'm going to kill this old man." Meanwhile, underground, Yu-won continues the hunt, splitting a worm open from the mouth and dissecting another through its midsection, leveling up again to finally reach level 20, with a full bag of marbles collected as well. Now level 20, Yu-won has a total of 3,527 points and 5 free stat points, but he notes he won't get a big reward till he takes out that, then choosing to allocate all 5 free stat points to magic power, as it's the foundation for his future powers and the most important stat. Thinking his magic power of 18 is a good start, as even the minority who had the tower's blessing started off with 12. Yuan then calling out to the ceiling behind him, "You're watching, right?" Exposed from the shadows, the lackey reveals itself, expressing its surprise at being found in Yuan's level. Yuan says it was locked, the lackey replying that people that say that are the most terrifying. The lackey asks why he called out, surprised once more by Yuan's answer, to buy a skill. The lackey adding, "You're probably the first to do so on the second tutorial," with the store window appearing behind it. Scrolling through the skills shown, he asks if there's more, but backs down to the lackey, who asked if he's looking for a specific one, not wanting to draw unwanted attention. Deciding on the skill Monkey's Eyes, costing him 2,000 points. The lackey confused at his choice since it's not that good, then using all but his remaining 27 points on the basic arcane sword, with the ability to envelop the sword in magical power. The lackey complimenting his choice this time around, disappearing with a glow, ending, "I have high expectations," leaving Yuan wondering if he has become a special administration target. Though it matters not, since he got to this point fairly, so they have nothing to punish him for. The only bad thing being him being a returner, but will they figure it out? After all, clock movement was created by Kronos, Odin, and Mimir. Kronos even erasing his existence as a penalty for using it. So not even admins, let alone lackeys, should be able to tell. Even still, his goal doesn't change. Activating his new rank F skill, we see its effects, increasing vision and fortifying the 5 senses. Now finding himself face to face with the boss of the second tutorial, the mother worm. He stomps on the body of one of its children, forcing out its pain screeches. Yuan using this to enrage the protective mother worm, who rushes forward, crushing its surrounding children, blinded by rage. Yuan leaping into the air, evading its bite, then butchering the monster on its back, cutting, slashing, and stabbing it, leaping into the air once more when it flips, surfing along its body while cutting it apart, leaping one final time, thanking it mid-air for coming straight for him, delivering one final magic-infused slash, splitting its face and body clean through. At the safe zone, Myung-hoon forces more people out of the zone, justifying it as the choice of the majority. Though those on the outside argue back at his tyranny, but with a knife in his hand, they can only await the disappearance of the shrinking barrier and the monsters beyond its protection. But with 3 seconds to spare, the time in the system window stops, then alerting them that they passed the second tutorial and the safety zone will stop shrinking, the second tutorial ending in 15 hours. Whilst atop the mother worm, Yuan sits, talking to the lackey about the fight. It's been 30 minutes since he defeated it. Him thinking that as the mother worm's death was never considered possible, the lackeys must have been discussing what the reward should be, bluntly asking the one present, "What's my reward?" Again poking the lackey's curiosity at this overly knowledgeable human. But moving on, Yuan is given 3 choices. First, to skip straight to the 5th tutorial, also including the info and rewards from the 3rd and 4th tutorials. The second option is simply points, and the third option is connecting him with Olympus, a recommendation to one of the organizations that rule over the tower. Still, after thinking it over, Yuan decides to go with the second reward, stunning the lackey, receiving 10,000 points as his reward. The lackey tries to sway him to the third option since he hasn't used the points yet, but Yuan knows better, telling it to do its job properly since that definitely wasn't approved by the administrator, adding, "I wonder if the other lackeys were bought out by Olympus or the other powers in the tower." Now, with one more thing to do, he requests a meeting with the administrator for 1,000 points, to the lackey's horror. The admin accepting, with Yuan thinking the tutorial is a place that must be separated from the tower, and he will certainly not overlook this. Then the tower's lowest floor, The tutorial administrator, appearing in a flash of purple, greets the unusual human who he's heard so much about. Yuan ignores the administrator, who asks how he knew of his existence, instead reciting the first law of the tutorial. All information regarding the tutorial must not be given by the administrator or the tower, but obtained by the participant's own ability. The administrator, with his ability to discern truth or lies from all spoken words in the tutorial, replying, "I see." Yuan then exposing the lackey's connection to Olympus. The lackey choking on their words as the administrator stares them down with burning eyes, then crushing the lackey into nothing but a blood smear, cursing Olympus for ruining yet another thing in the tower. Yuan, ignoring the admin's words of thanks, states the second law of the tutorial. All achievements must be compensated by a reward of equal value. Yuan, having used his points to call on the admin and get rid of a corrupt lackey, asking, "What do you think?" The admin lets out a hearty laugh, thinking over what to give as a reward, then extending his hand to Yuan, who thinks it must be points, disappointed. However, as the two grasp hands, Yuan is imbued with magical power, obtaining the skill Master of Mana, increasing all aspects of his mana usage and raising his magic power by 5. The admin then leaving to deal with the rest of the lackeys. The now alone Yuan, stunned that he possesses an S+ rank skill in the tutorial, though the proficiency is low. Then summoning a mana blast in his hand to test his limits, but with less than 40 magic power, the blast goes out of control, rampaging around the underground space. Yuan satisfied with his strength despite its instability for now, then clenching his fists, reminding himself that this is not enough to be satisfied with 13.5 hours remaining, charging forward into the remaining horde of earthworms. Back on the surface, those remaining discuss the state of the country, when someone finds a man returning from outside the safe zone, one of them yelling in warning to Yuan, but unfazed he stomps down on the head of a monster, turning back to the crowd, telling them to continue their meaningless discussion. Yuan entering the safe zone to the welcome of Myung-hoon, but observing the situation he confronts the absurd bastard who forced people outside, risking their lives for rations. Myung-hoon declaring that this is what it takes to survive in this new world. One must be shameless. Yuan then leaving once again with the start of the third tutorial, leaving the last words of "I won't interfere, but don't cross the line, no matter what line it is." The third tutorial requires participants to hunt the monsters in the district and acquire 50 essences within 3 days, or the relevant districts will be destroyed, with the swelling gate in the middle of the city to open at the end of the 3 days. Yuan emptying his bag, which contained 132 mana essence, into the satchels that were given, making his way toward the myriad of monsters before him, summoning a ball of mana above his palm, then pouring more mana into the blast until it is complete, registering Mana Blast as a skill, and then launching the magic attack into the approaching pack of monsters, decimating them all. The single attack draining his mana and hard to control due to his current stats and proficiency. Yuan then collecting the mana essence amongst the aftermath, surprised to see the frightened remnants of the monster wave, pulling out his knife, determined not to waste the remaining time. On the second day of the third tutorial, we find a party of 3 level 10 participants making their way through the underground station. Han Jun-ho lamenting that they must hide in this spooky place since only 400 people still remain of the initial 1,400. Earning a sigh from Kang Song-chan, the trailing Lim Ju-yeon telling them to wait, spotting a convenience store in the distance. Having caught a lucky break, they happily make their way toward it. Jun-ho running ahead, unaware of the giant spider lurking above his head. The man meeting his end, head eaten, with a pack of monsters emerging from the shadows. The remaining 2 quickly summoning their weapons, tense with fear. Overwhelmed, the 2 struggle to fend them off, suffering a bite and wounds in the process. Ju-yeon contemplating their death as a rat launches forward, the monster then bursting with blood from a mana-infused attack from behind. Yuan clenching a can in his grasp, ticked off at the noise interrupting his sleep. Ju-yeon tears up at the inconceivable sight of a man killing a monster with a mere tin can. Yu-won sending the head of a zombie flying with a throw of another, then taking a fighting stance with his knife in hand, exploding forward and dispatching the remaining monsters in a chain of attacks. The two survivors expressing their thanks to him, weak from their wounds. Seeing their state, Yu-won chucks a small bottle to them to use on their wounds, asking what their stamina is. Sung-chan answering around 17. Yu-won explaining that they should survive, though he might not be able to use that arm in the future. Since the tutorial began, Yu-won, busy slaughtering monsters to level up, has hardly slept, only recently being able to thanks to the scentless powder he bought, preparing to leave immediately, thinking those two will only slow him down. Ju-yeon warning him of the dangers that await if he stays down here. Him replying that this is only his resting area and that he has separate hunting grounds. On the second floor, the two, having followed Yu-won, react to the separate dungeon and its chain structure. Yu-won asking them why they followed, knowing how dangerous it is here. Ju-yeon explaining that outside they formed groups and started killing each other in distrust, so they ran. Yu-won replying that even if he doesn't kill them, down here they will end up dead. Then extending an olive branch, he gives them a deal with a smile. Sung-chan now finding himself screaming for help as he runs away from a serpent monster. Yu-won dashing in and stabbing it right in the head through its mouth, jumping off that one and onto another behind, dicing it up with a blitz of slashes, whilst Sung-chan watches on in awe of his ability, with them gaining 50 essence in just 2 hours, handing over 5 of the 6 from the 2 monsters before noting that Ju-yeon is a bit late. Her then arriving with a horde of monsters on her tail, running for her life. Yu-won darting toward her and the monsters she lured, with the two also joining in on the hunt and leveling up. And after splitting the essence, both of them now have 50 essence each. Ju-yeon thanking Yu-won for their success, but he declines, noting with them he hunted 50% faster and collected a ton of essence. Yu-won then leading the two back to the surface, as it's about time for the gate to be activated. Back on the surface, soon to be open, the gate has turned red. Crowds of people surrounding it, with one of the groups of people led by Myung-hoon, who threatens a smaller group to give up their essence. The crowd then split apart by the arrival of Yu-won and the other two. Yu-won placing down a box full of essences, stunning everyone present. Yu-won having drawn a circle in the ground around him, announcing that he doesn't need these and he will be trading them to anyone, 100 points for 1 essence. Myung-hoon then trying to take advantage of the numbers, stirs up hostility in the crowd, claiming he must have stole these from people and is now trying to extort them. Ju-yeon and Sung-chan arguing back that he has no right to say that and they know nothing about Yu-won. Myung-hoon, triggered by their words, ordering his followers to kill them all. Yu-won cleanly beheading 2 leading the charge the moment they enter his circle. Yu-won declaring that no one has to buy from him, but the moment you cross the line for other reasons than buying, you die. Myung-hoon and his group not heeding the warning, as he orders them to kill him. Yu-won with his arcane sword activated, dispatching the swarming man with ease. The scene of the slaughter leaving Myung-hoon trembling as he gets snapped back to the reality of this world, then turning to flee, thinking he'll be safe if he doesn't enter the circle. But Yu-won, with a cold and menacing smile, states, "Do you think you'll be safe there?" before flashing forward and separating Myung-hoon's head from his body, then relocating his box of essences from the grotesque scene, with a leader from one of the groups raising his hand, declaring that he will buy some essence. Entering Yu-won's new circle and extending his hand, asking for 7 with a please. And entering the gate, disappearing inside with the conditions met. This scene resulting in a spending spree, the crowd of people selling their stats, skills, and items for points to trade with Yu-won, who thinks whilst this is better than them dying right here, they will realize how precious the stats they lost were as they climbed the tower. Though, thanks to them, he now has 167,400 points. Them finding Ju-yeon and Sung-chan still waiting around, wishing to go with him. Yuan replying that he's not going as he has no essence left. The two panicking over his clumsiness, but Yuan is unbothered. Yuan telling them to go now before it gets chaotic, separating from the pair, who then enter the gate. Yuan noting that the next tutorial must be defense, and that this area will soon be a warfield, with 1 hour remaining in the tutorial. So he decides to relocate, and calls for the store aloud. But instead of a lackey, he finds himself greeted by the floor admin, who explains that he's here because they're in the process of recruiting new lackeys. Then opening the store and telling him he has what he needs, so speak up. Yuan first buying a mid-grade storage personal inventory for 10,000 points. Then an Arctic steel sword for 50,000 points. Immediately putting the sword in his new storage by giving the command inventory, also buying a pyromancy robe and magic nullification shield for 60,000 and 20,000 points apiece. Equipping these two, thinking with these items he'll be able to go to the higher floors of the tower. Additionally buying 4 ice crystals for 20,000 points. Finally ending his spending spree with a well-sharpened sword for 2,000 points. Yuan, now with only 5,400 points left, admiring his basic sword, which the admin notes is the complete opposite to the previous items he bought. Also saying that with this, there won't be any participants that can do a thing to him. That is, if they're participants. These words catching Yuan's attention and giving him pause. The admin then disappearing in a purple flash, saying he looks forward to it. Tutorial number 3 finally coming to an end, with the time hitting 0. With this, destruction, the 176th giant begins, flames erupting throughout the region, destroying everything in their wake. A horde of trash glass demons called Skull sprouting from the flames. Yuan, sword and shield in hand, nonchalantly approaching, prepared for the arrival of the one described as destruction, appearing from the pillar of flames reaching the skies. The low-class demon, Suratra. Yuan thinking that the 176th child of Surta must be nerfed for balance, as he's smaller than he was during Ragnarok, the flaming giant looking down on him to find he has the same eyes as Wukong. Suratra asking if he too will escape this place, summoning a sword of flames and displaying his fiery aura. Yuan easily resists thanks to the effects of the pyromancy robe, stepping forward and declaring that he is going to hunt the giant. Suratra, sitting on a throne of flames, tells him to say that when he gets here. Yuan then diving into the army of skull demons, leveling up multiple times as he tears his way through their numbers, also blocking the long-range bombardment of Suratra with the magic nullification shield. He then calls out to the demon to stop with the small fry and come down himself. The demon taking the bait and leaping down, facing him who, despite being qualified to advance and possessing the traits of one that will become a high ranker, chose to stay behind. Suratra raises his sword and states, "I will be your opponent." Our boy focusing all his fiery chi in his body and blocking with the shield raised. The shield shattering under the immense pressure, taking the hit. Yuan thinking back on Wukong, telling him how he failed the 3rd stage and ended up getting his eyes in the destruction that followed. Suratra looks at the aftermath, confused, thinking that it felt like he took the attack on purpose. The giant left in shock when Yuan emerges alive from the rubble. Getting to his feet, still thinking about the past with Wukong, who he only bested a few times when they sparred. The main reasons being his Ruyi Jingu staff, the flying nimbus, and his heaven's treasure, infinite magic power. But the biggest reason he was difficult to fight was Cinder Eyes, the ability he just unlocked through the hidden conditions, transforming Monkey's Eyes into the A-rank skill Cinder Eyes. Yuan, having obtained Cinder Eyes, summons the Arctic Sword, ready to end this hunt. He then swallows 2 ice crystals to lower his body temperature, removing the burn status effect and adding cold energy to his magic power. Then clashing swords with the complete opposite power to Suratra, raging in his body, with both the pyromancy robe and Cinder Eyes helping Yuan resist his colossal fire. Yuan then disengages the clash of swords and launches forward, delivering a slash to the side of the fire giant. Sriracha then summoning 2 balls of purple fire in return. Yuan using the skill Cinderize to predict the movement of the attack, which allows him to accurately block the powerful attack and explosion. He then swallows 2 more ice crystals, giving him frostbite from the extreme cold in his body. Harnessing the cold within him and using the Arctic sword to dash below the demon and cut his heel to bring him to his knees. Then, using his skill Mana Blast, he creates a massive ball of mana above his head and launches it at Sriracha's head, staggering the giant. Yuan using this opening to jump on his back, resisting the scorching heat of the fire giant at close range, and driving the Arctic sword imbued with his cold attribute mana into the nape of his head, successfully stopping the destruction of the tutorial with the fall of Sriracha. Yuan grinning in satisfaction, leveling up multiple times and obtaining an unbelievable achievement, the results being delayed due to the impossible achievement. With his body in a mess, he looks over the giant's corpse, thinking let's not complain yet, cause there's a long way to go. Then, taking apart the lower class demon's corpse, he finds an embedded crystal called Giant's Heart, an elixir that bestows the power of the giants and a fixed amount of mana, deciding that in his current state he can't take it right away since it changes his physical body and he would need a lot of stamina. Then, putting it away at the arrival of the administrator, who is under a lot of stress from others because the balance of this tutorial is a mess. The two shaking hands with Yuan receiving 10,000 points and a high rank skill Heavenly Slaying Star, the skill catching our boy off guard as he has never heard of this A+ rank skill that increases all stats by 3 based on the opponents he kills. Then also buying a lesser Scarlet Medicine Ball for 10,000 points. The admin leaving with a goodbye whilst Yuan waits for his injuries to recover with the help of the medicine ball. Yuan taking the next 4 hours to rest before he's transported straight to the 5th tutorial that is a fight with time. Time passes and the area around Yuan warps with the start of the last tutorial. Yuan now finding himself joined up with a crowd of participants who made it to the final tutorial from several worlds. The combined tutorial known as the Collective World, in which the island they're on will sink in 30 days, and the only way they can get the qualification to escape is to hunt the boss monster at the top of the island and CP. Contribution points given for their part in the hunt, their CP score and the remaining time determining the prize they receive should they succeed. Yuan knowing that the fact they were given 30 days means they will need the time to hunt the boss, which shows how powerful it is. Some of the participants then try to form teams, but a mysterious cloaked figure refuses, saying he will choose his own teammates as he can't trust them, and he can tell they are not qualified to be his companions. This scene reminding Yuan that that guy was here too, with some of the crowd then rushing the cloaked man, angered at his words, only to be electrocuted by golden lightning. The cloaked man revealing himself to be Hargon, the self-proclaimed heir of Olympus and descendant of Zeus. Our boy impressed by his strength this early in the tower, thinking that's the top purebloods' power. Purebloods being those who were selected to enter the tower after being born and raised inside it, giving them an inevitable edge in knowledge and power over the participants, which isn't fair. Yuan noting that in his previous life, that guy was the #1 contributor in this tutorial. He decides it's best to avoid him and leave, but gets stalked by Hargon, who asks, "Who are you?" Hargon pointing at the pyromancy robe and questioning why he has the item. Yuan simply replying, "I bought it with points." This shocks Hargon, who then bluntly asks what his level is. Yuan telling him he's being a bit disrespectful. Hargon, moving past his words, confidently offers to manage a team together, but our boy has already declined and turned around before he even finishes. The blatant refusal triggering Hargon, who speeds after Yuan, leaving a trail of lightning in his wake. Hargon makes quick work of a bunch of monsters with his lightning as he chases Yuan, but unable to keep up with his pace, he wonders if he too is a pureblood. perhaps even from the Hermes bloodline. The thought giving him a broad smile, as now the tutorial is a lot more interesting than he expected. Meanwhile, our boy looks back, impressed by Hargon's monstrous powers that allowed him to keep up for so long, then refocusing on a cave in front of him, slaughtering tens of gnolls inside the cave, which only managed to increase the completion of his heavenly slaying star skill by 0.01%. But he didn't come here to hunt. Instead, spreading the scentless powder and grabbing the giant's heart from the inventory, then biting down on and consuming the elixir. Giant's and demon's blood rampaging throughout his body, while Cinderize tries to suppress the heat. He crashes to the floor, overwhelmed by the pressure that feels like his bones and muscles are being distorted, and his blood is running backwards. Yuan remembering the words of Hercules in the midst of the pain, telling him to endure and get as much out of it as possible, and to forget the heart without Cinderize. Various stats increase as Yuan wonders how much time has passed. Then, Cinderize controls the giant's fire, meeting the requirement for the hidden piece and obtaining the skill Colossal Fire. Yuan collapsing in exhaustion, frustrated at acquiring a different skill than they planned. Still in distress on the ground, half a day has passed, when Yuan finally meets the requirements for the hidden piece, completely absorbing the giant's heart in the tutorial district and obtaining gigantification, before closing his eyes, satisfied. Yuan then wakes up half a day later, having passed out twice in this tutorial already, thinking he needs to hurry since Odin, the greatest magic fighter, had set the record clear time at 1 week. Our boy opening the rankings to see Hargon first on 1036 points, with a big gap from the second place Yolche. Yuan noting the 5th and 3rd rank elven siblings Alador and Paladinte, who both become rankers, whilst he has never heard of Yolche or the 4th place Lee Sung-yoon. Yuan checks his stats, thinking his strength and stamina are now too high, so he'll need to balance it. He then leaves the cave and uses Cinderize to scout the surroundings, finding an outpost of orcs and making his way toward them. With the flick of a finger, he tests his new skill, Colossal Fire, summoning a swirl of fire throughout the camp, then diving into the chaos and cutting down an orc in one stroke, now at 67 points. His eyes burning, with 6 days to beat the tutorial faster than Odin. Time passes and Hargon is now only a couple hundred points ahead of Yuan. Him and his teammate Lee Sung-yoon talking about how they wish to bring Yuan in. Sung-yoon joking about how Yuan may soon overtake him, but Hargon says, well, that's just cause I was busy gathering these guys. His star-studded lineup now beginning their hunt, with Hargon thinking there is still a final spot left for Yuan. Half a day later, Hargon and his team following Paladinte's skill find a dungeon, but when they enter, he notices that there was no discovery message. Sung-yoon then tells his captain to check the ranks, where they find Kim Won-yoon now topping the rankings, more than 100 points ahead of Hargon. Ticked off by this, Hargon vents by blitzing through the monsters in the cave, then telling the others to split into teams as there is a forked road. Sung-yoon, Yolche, and Alador's team fighting their way through the dungeon eventually come across a giant gate, the 3 big shots concluding it must be a boss room. Then, Sung-yoon gets startled after checking the ranks, the earth shaking immediately after. Yolche tells everyone to get in position, with the commotion seemingly from behind the gate. The group then enter the boss room, but the attack is already over. Only the silhouette of the menacing Kim Yuan staring down on them in the room covered in blood from atop the boss monster's corpse. Yuan telling the new arrivals, "You're a little late." The team of elites left stunned that Yuan was able to take down this monster alone, wondering if their captain, who they recognize as the strongest, could do so. Sung-yoon steps forward and talks to Yuan, asking if he would like to join since he is alone. Yuan then glances over the team, noticing this must be part of Hargon's team since Alador is here, also paying attention to Yolche, who ranked after Hargon. He thinks that he gathered really good teammates, but when Sung-yoon presses for an answer, he bluntly rejects them with a no thanks. Yolche then explains that given the time limit, it's been set up for them to work together to clear it without problems. But Yuan just says, so their talk then interrupted by another earthquake. Alador explaining she contacted the team leader, so he's on his way. A streak of lightning then flashing toward the center of the room, with Hargon emerging from it, yelling out Yuan's name, now face to face with him. Without hesitation, Yuan effortlessly slams his head into the corpse of the boss monster below, everyone in his team flinching and grimacing at the sight. Yuan then asking them if what they want is survival or to become a ranker. This statement shocking the pureblood Yolche, since a non-pureblood like Yuan shouldn't know of rankers. Rankers being those who overcome all tests in the tower and have attacked all flaws in it, gaining fame, immortality, and power. Yuan, who sees this as only a step in his journey, saying he has no interest in stuff like that. Yolche clenching her teeth at his arrogance, asking if not that, then are you aiming to be a high ranker? But Yuan, pointing to the skies with a clear tone and straight face, declares, I will destroy the ceilings of the tower. The disbelieving atmosphere of the others then snapped by the sudden bounce back of Hargon, who asked what was that for. Yuan blankly stating he thought he was attacking, but the annoyed Hargon says he was just going to grab him. His rage then quelled when Yuan calls him a strong person when explaining why he acted. His teammates astonished he believed that. Hargon then declares that he shouldn't look down on him because he will one day become the king of Olympus, his ambition leaving a slight smirk on Yuan's face. The determined pureblood then offering a bet where if he and his team kill the boss first and accumulate the most contribution points, Yuan will join them. And if Yuan and any team he may form wins, he'll serve him as his young Nim or big brother. However, Yuan changes the terms to Hargon helping him just once when he needs his help. Hargon accepts and boisterously sends him off, whilst our boy thinks he's got too much energy. Hargon then jumps down and tells his teammates to prepare to hurry up even more, but is interrupted by Yuan, who informs him that they won't need to rush, pointing to the remaining time left, saying the time won't be moving for the time being. When Hargon sees the remaining time stopped, he asks Yuan what's happening, and he explains that the island is actually a divine beast, with all the monsters in the hidden dungeon being parasites that torture its body. It was planning to go underwater so the parasites wouldn't be able to live in its body. Hargon left in shock at Yuan's knowledge, unsure if he should trust it since even Olympus didn't know this info. Whilst Yuan thinks back on Odin, who told him it wasn't that he hunted the boss in a week, but he stopped time from flowing. Yuan then walks off as he thinks they need to use this time effectively to grow stronger, so when time starts flowing again, they can end the tutorial. Elsewhere, the lackeys panic over the death of the parasites and the absence of the administrator who is dealing with Olympus. Whilst Yuan back on the surface hunts red orcs to the point that they run in fear of him. Yuan notices that time has started to flow again, so the lackeys must have resolved it and killing the parasite dragon again probably wouldn't work. Instead, he decides the 4 days they gained is enough and he's ready to finish the tutorial and enter the tower. On the mountain, those who are around level 20 or higher gather, ready to begin the final raid. Sung Yoon, Alador, and Yolche discuss mana control in the tower, and how those that don't are mostly residents of the tower. People like Yolche and Hargon, who grew up in the tower but weren't chosen and obtained the system's blessings to become purebloods. Alador then drawing their attention to Yuan, who just arrived. Yuan looks at them and thinks the flow of mana has changed, so they must have leveled a fair bit. Hargon then greets Yuan, who is still without a team. Hargon determined to overcome the 7,000 point difference between them and kill the boss first. Yuan then heads straight for the dungeon entrance, with Hargon and his group on his tail. Yuan crashes into the boss room filled to the brim with various bloodlusted monsters, the others behind him slightly unnerved at their number. Whilst Yuan, who knows where the boss commanding them is, pulls out his sword and activates the combo skill Colossal Fire Arcane Sword. He then launches into the air and crashes into the center of the horde, with a red orc pinned under him with his sword through its neck, whilst the members of Hargon's team look on astonished at his strength, Sung Yoon even saying he is more monster-like than their team leader. Ticked off by this, Hargon bursts forward himself, unwilling to lose to Yuan. He leaves a trail of lightning and destruction in his wake as he chases after him. The other main members of his group working together to break through the traps and monsters and catch up to the two. Yuan and Hargon then arrive at a grand door with a strange painting on it. Yuan enters quickly whilst Hargon, who is contemplating the painting, tries to get him to wait and go together, but fails. When his team arrive, a massive gust of air and a loud noise erupt from the door. This shocks them, but their leader, who knows how strong the monster is, tells them, "Let's head in," with a concerned look. Inside, they find Yuan in front of a massive chain chimera as it roars and rampages behind cell bars. Hargon says to Yuan, "So that's the final boss." However, Yuan remains silent at his comment. System messages then pop up and detail that someone can break the chimera's sealing crystal and it will become their familiar. They will pass the tutorial and earn additional CP according to the number of people they kill. Alador then comments that they have to hunt the chimera whilst protecting the crystal from people they're meant to trust. And Yolche adds that with only 10 people it shouldn't be hard, as she thinks only Yuan is as fast as the captain. Then Yuan takes a step and Hargon grabs him. He asks if he's betraying them and if he forgot their bet. However, Yuan says he will win the bet and be the one to end the tutorial. His words anger Hargon, who continues to question why, and Yuan says this is why he wanted to do things alone. He summons his sword from the inventory to Hargon's shock and launches it at the sealing crystal. The crystal shatters on impact as Hargon yells out his name. The chimera, now unsealed from its bonds, becomes Yuan's familiar and destroys its prison with a roar. Yuan, with the angry Hargon still grasping his shoulder, then orders the chimera to destroy a wall. The beast complies and destroys the wall, as Yuan tells them not to worry about the beast since he controls it and he'll have to fight another enemy now. He tells them a chimera is a monster created from other monsters and asks, so who made the chimera? Adding it's up to them if they want to help him as he walks into the hole in the wall. Hargon under Sung Yoon's question of what to do, declaring they will follow. They follow behind Yuan and the chimera to find a long passageway that even Olympus didn't know of. Eventually, they enter the hidden boss room to the site of a workshop full of grotesque creations and failures, with the chimera creator focused on his work in the center of the room. The chimera creator turns to the intruders, surprised that someone came here instead of betraying the chimera and taking its authority. The creator then singled out Hargon as the son of Zeus and says he'll be useful even if he's just a half-god, to the purebloods' fury. Yuan then reveals the creator is Dark Magician Child, a ranker who, after experimenting on participants of the 50th floor that he supervised, has lost all of his powers and must make tutorial bosses here for 1,000 years as punishment. Child questions how he knows about him, and Yuan points to his eyes as he says, "Do you remember?" with a mocking smile. Child then explodes in wrath at the sight of his eyes, and Yuan and Hargon utilize their fire and lightning to resist. Yuan and Hargon discuss his strength despite losing his powers, as Child rages at the bastard with the monkey's eyes. He sends forth his nightmarish monsters and screams at Yuan to answer why he has those eyes. Yuan declines to answer and says he can't let trash like him live, as his chimera takes out a bunch of monsters. Hargon and his group then join the battle and face off against the creatures with their magic and skills. Whilst they take on the monsters, Yuan walks toward Child, who activates his skill, Dark Casket. The skill traps Yuan inside a dark coffin, and he mocks Yuan for underestimating him. However, Yuan destroys the skill with his immense strength. Yuan's enlarged hand reminds Child of Hercules, and he asks what's his relationship with Olympus. But Yuan ignores him and activates the skill Gigantification in his arms, whilst Child raises his staff and sends out dark streaks toward him. Yuan snatches them out of the air, but still finds himself in a 3-layered dark casket. Despite this, he smashes clean through it immediately and charges at Child, who sends poisonous green fangs at him with another skill. Yuan charges up a powerful strike as he destroys the venomous fangs and advances toward him. The Dark Magician, astonished at his strength, thinks even if he's Hercules' descendant, it should be impossible to break his skill like that. He then summons his strongest defensive skill, Ebony Thorn Wall, to trap Yuan once again. His gloating once again cuts short when cracks start to appear in the skill. He then strengthens the skill with more dark magic and smiles with a cold sweat when the banging from the inside stops. The skill then blows apart before his eyes, and Yuan emerges to grab and slam him into the ground. Yuan mounts him and lays blow after blow into his head as he thinks back on the words of Wukong and Hercules, who told him to be sure to fight the Chimera Creator if he obtained both their skills. However, the bloodied and bruised creator just laughs maniacally as he is an immortal undead chimera, thanks to his 1,000 years of dark magic experiments. However, with these eyes, Yuan can see everything anyway. Yuan using Cinder Eyes to see his weaknesses and tear his body apart as he confronts him for all those that died by his hands and eliminates the Chimera Creator. With this, he obtains an unbelievable achievement and ends the tutorial. He levels up twice and increases the completion rate of the Heaven Slaying Star skill, which increases all his stats. He thinks this must mean every time the completion rate increases by 5%, his stats will increase by 1. Meanwhile, the Chimera monsters that were fighting the others collapse with the tutorial's end. Alador asks if anyone is hurt and quickly rushes to heal Yolche, who is seriously injured, whilst Hargon watches on silently in thought. Hargon and Yuan then leave the others to talk. Hargon says he won't question how he knows what he does, but someone is severely injured. He then presses Yuan over how he can risk their lives when he could have set a record without defeating the Chimera Creator, and asks when will he be satisfied. Yuan wonders about this himself. He thinks back to the overwhelming power of the Outer Gods that saw many rankers die in order to catch just one of them, and yet no one knows how many there are. This being the reason he must continue to get stronger. Yuan answers, "I don't know," and tells Hargon what he's looking for is a team he can travel with, and that's why they can't form a team together. Yuan then turns to speak to the administrator behind them, which shocks Hargon that someone comparable to top rankers is here. The administrator expresses his annoyance with Olympus when Hargon introduces himself, but Yuan tells him to chill since he is innocent. The admin then rants about Yuan, who continues to make chaos for him, and Yuan tells him to hurry up and hand over his rewards. The admin pulls out his reward, a dark divine crystal, which is also known as a fragment of the Helm of Invisibility. The helm being one of the strongest items of Olympus that belong to Hades of Olympus's big three. Yuan gladly accepts it as he needs it and already knows where the fragment of the trident is, the fragment of the lightning bolt being the main problem. The admin then says that everyone else will get rewards according to their CP and sends them out of the tutorial, as he tells them it might not be bad if they become the wave that shakes the core of the tower. The rankings showing Yuan first on 674,880 points, and Hargon and Yolche second and third respectively. Yuan obtaining 67,488 points and an additional 50,000 for breaking the record, as well as an unknown egg that appears in his inventory. Yuan then arrives on the first floor and checks his inventory, surprised to see the unknown egg. Hargon then appears beside him, and a system message informs them that this is the first floor outer region, the Meadow of Beginnings. The two then talk, with Yuan confirming that he won't be joining any of the guilds scouting here, and that if Hargon wants to find out the true colors of Olympus, he should find out for himself, since he won't believe him even if he tells him. Yuan then leaves alone, with only a wave as a goodbye, whilst Hargon tells him to register as a player so they can keep in touch, and to be careful of jackals. Jackals are participants who gave up on the next floor and instead kill and loot new players in the Meadow of the Beginning. Their favorite prey being players yet to join a guild that are found during the period after the tutorial ends, that they call the Time of Harvest. Yuan walks on his own and notes that they have already started stalking him. He grabs the Dark Divine Crystal in his pocket and thinks the jackals are perfect to test his stealth skill. The boss of those trailing him then notices that he disappeared. The heads of 3 jackals fly into the air in the next moment. Caught off guard, the jackal boss pulls his weapon, unable to see or find the assailant, as more are cut down around him. The boss even fails to find anything with his skill Falcon Eyes, and is left astonished that a new player can use such a stealth skill. Yuan, having dealt with the rest, then grabs and slams the boss into the ground. He asks him if he knows where a guy named Mu Woon Chon is. The boss asking back how he knows that person, which gives Yuan a smile as he has hit the jackpot. Later that day, Yuan sits alone on the balcony of a cafe in the middle area. He thinks about how nice it is that he can acquire the intel he needs so quickly thanks to his revival. Yuan pulls out the Dark Divine Crystal and thinks that whilst it's powerful, it's not an ultimate stealth like the helm. He decides that if he can craft the powerful crystal into an infinity gem, stealth won't be a problem. Yuan then giving a broad smile as he thinks of the adjusty or old man he'll see again someday. The next day, Yuan uses the player kit to finally register as a player. He then puts the kit away and heads towards a smithy. Inside the store full of weapons is steamy like a sauna. Then a short and muscular man appears from the back. The man is surprised to see the pyromancy robe and assumes this person isn't from this area. Yuan instead looks at a weapon and states he came to the right place. Yuan then picks up the weapon and notes that they are all failed weapons. He asks if he is Volcro to the now seemingly maddened blacksmith. Volcro asks where he came from, but Yuan just says not to be wary. He pulls out his player kit that shows he is in fact a player of the first floor, which manages to quell some of his suspicion. Yuan then moves on and pulls out the Dark Divine Crystal as he says he's here to commission an item. The old man takes a closer look and notes it's an uncrafted stone with a bead of sweat forming on his cheek. Yuan asks if it is possible and he answers that it is. The old man in shock when Yuan tells him he got it as a tutorial reward. Volcro tells him he can only refine it now since he'll need to get more adequate materials to withstand the stone's power. He then asks why Yuan wouldn't trust this to him after seeing his weapons. However, Yuan picks up the sword from before that actually has perfect center of gravity and comments that he can ruin the handle and edges but old habits die hard and that it seems he forgot to mess with the balance. The old man then bursts into laughter at his words and decides to accept the job on the sole condition that he tells no one where it was refined or that it was refined. Yuan, of course, happy to accept. The next day at breakfast, Yuan thinks of how it will take about 10 days before Volcro is done. Then, Hagon takes the seat opposite him and sits down. He found Yuan through his connections on the first floor, which Yuan doesn't think strange since Olympus is the most influential on this floor. The two talk about his player kit and number and how Hagon will go up in 5 days after working on his team's teamwork. To which Yuan then asks him to do a job with him to exterminate the jackals. Hagen replies that it will be hard with just them and his team, but Yuan cuts him off saying it'll be just them. He says it's too early to explain in detail, but if he doesn't want to, he'll go alone. Hagen quickly accepts and shovels down the food in front of him, then getting up to go since he needs to make time for them to meet. Yuan watches him leave thinking he must really like his team since he's putting in so much effort. He then looks to a man hidden under a cloak and asks what business he has with him. The man reveals himself to be Agamemnon of Olympus and introduces himself. Yuan asks why he didn't greet Hagon, who is a descendant of Zeus, as he takes a seat at the table. He says that he couldn't, as his objective was to meet him, who placed first in the tutorial by an immense difference. He adds that he's heard Yuan and Hagon are friends, but instead compliments Yuan for not teaming with him and says he should form a team that fits his level as he invites him to come under his lord, Ares of Olympus. Finishing his spiel, he ends Ares is different from that lowly half-blood whose mother is unknown. He goes on to praise the high rank of Ares' heritage as the son of Zeus and Hera and claims it's better to be with them than some unknown. Yuan then interrupts his babble and shots his coffee, then getting up to leave as he states he has no plans to be part of any place. Yuan confronts Agamemnon for spouting such words about Hagon and declares, I won't be siding with you lowly people either. After Yuan leaves, the still simmering Agamemnon is greeted by a subordinate. The elitist Olympian orders him to gather as many jackals as they can and to kill Kim Yuan when their collections are done in 2 days. 2 days later, Yuan and Hagon walk through the streets as they head towards someone's place. Hagon, looking at Yuan's strange eyes, wonders if he is the descendant of that monkey. After all, he heard what Child said back then, the great sage Sun Wukong, who became a high ranker in under 100 years. But then again, Yuan also used fire just like Apollo in gigantism that Hercules only obtained after hunting 10,000 giants. He wonders if he is a part of the giant clan, and what if that's why he didn't join Olympus. Yuan then snaps Hagon from his thoughts as they have arrived. The two enter the building to the apology of a man who claims they are closed. However, Yuan just says the name Mu Woon Chon, and the man immediately sprints for it. Yuan chases after him and grabs his collar. The man in return pulls out a kunai and attempts to slash Yuan, who slams him headfirst into the ground to the disbelief of the pinned man. Yuan explains to Hagan that he is a player from the martial realm that gave up on climbing the tower and has rabies. Hagan, observing the pathetic looking man, says that it's hard to believe that he is the king of the jackals just cause he ran. However, Yuan knows better and shows him the poison on the knife that is melting the floor as they speak. The captured man's face and voice then changing as he asks where he heard this. The man tries to threaten them with who's backing him before noticing Hagan's hair and eye color. Hagan then remembers how Yuan told him earlier to respond properly. He realizes this is what he meant and activates his lightning skill. The man seeing this comments that it's true Olympus betrayed them. Yuan takes the chance to press further and gets him to admit he's working with Agamemnon, whilst Hagan keeps his silence. Yuan continues his lies and pretends they have Zeus's backing, so if he wants the jackals to continue and maybe even get a role in Olympus, he should side with them instead of Agamemnon, who doesn't even serve one of the big three. The man gives in to Yuan's temptation as Hagan watches on, internally in turmoil. With him on their side now, Yuan tells him to gather all jackals at a specific location tomorrow at midnight and leaves with Hagan. Outside, the fuming Hagan demands that Yuan explain what just happened. However, Yuan says it's just as he saw. Olympus has been working with the jackals. Hagan tries to deny that the great Olympus would do such things, but Yuan tells him this is the true colors of Olympus and leaves him to think it over. The next day, Yuan waits alone at the edge of the town, when Hagan finally appears to join him, having settled his thoughts. He declares whilst clenching his fist in determination that if the jackals are Olympus's dirty laundry, then he will throw it out himself. At the meeting place located in some cave, the thousands of jackals gather and wait. The king of the jackals, Mu Woon Chon, then steps up to address them and announces that they have a new mission that will see them soar to the skies. Woon Chon then introduces the crowd to their new backers and bows toward the masked men who are our two boys. He then offers them a bundle of Asgard's currency worth 1,000 points a bill. Yuan takes the cash and smiles at the fact that with so many gathered he really completely switched sides. Yuan then snaps his fingers as he says goodbye, with the colossal flame then erupting and engulfing everyone present. The fire able to spread so quickly thanks to the oil they spread beforehand, soaked into the ground, and the scentless powder to hide the smell. Yuan and Hagan then dive into the crowd of burning jackals and begin the massacre. Winshan charges at Yuan for betraying him, but when he meets his eyes, his body freezes and Yuan cuts him down with a single slash, ending him and the jackals for good. Outside the cave, Yuan watches over Hagan, who is mentally exhausted after the slaughter. However, Yuan tells him that if they leave it be because of guilt, the jackals will be the ones to benefit from it. Hagan clears his mind after Yuan's few words, and compliments him for his strong mentality and kindness to do what's right for no gain. To which Yuan pulls out the Asgard notes as he says, not for no gain, and offers to split it with him. Hagan, with a hand on his head, gives in and accepts the blood money. Later that day, in the cave, Agamemnon and his subordinates observe the pile of burnt and rotting corpses. His subordinate informs him Woon Chon is probably amongst them, and the money is gone, which sees Agamemnon scream in uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, in his room, Yuan holds his share of the Asgard notes that total 384,000 CP. He thinks he'd like to exchange them for CP with Asgard now, but that would expose them to Olympus, so he decides to hold off for now. He then lays down and pulls out the unknown egg. Hagan told him his reward was a top-rank item, Hand of the Thunder King, so his egg must be at least the same level as the Dark Divine Crystal or something of a higher level. His focus then drawn to the pattern on the egg, which makes the world around him distort and reminds him of the outer god. After that, the egg greets him through a system message and he asks it, "What are you?" A few days pass and Yuan stands in front of the smithy, wondering if the unknown egg will be his ally or enemy when it hatches. Most creatures that hatch from eggs recognize the first thing they see as their mother and become a powerful ally, but he thinks it's a stupid gamble and he shouldn't rush. Now inside the smithy, he sits down with Volcro, who asks him what type of armor and weapons he likes, because he has some leftover materials. Yuan asks if he needs materials for that, but Volcro informs him that the leftovers can be combined with the mithril he has. Yuan puts his head down dejectedly, since that would be expensive and he won't have enough CP. However, Volcro, sensing his thoughts, says he'll put it on tab and that since he trusted him with the stone, he's just returning the favor. Yuan smiles at Volcro, who's just as he remembers, and pulls out his sword to show him what he wants. Volcro, smiling in return, as swords are his specialty. A week later, at the Olympus Guildhouse, Agamemnon prepares to complete a mission that could make up for his failure. The Olympian walks outside to the army of players they gathered from the 1st to 10th floors and declares they'll be arresting the criminal. Meanwhile, Volcro has completed the gemstone and admires its beauty. As he waits for Yuan to arrive, he hears a rumbling from outside. He grabs his hammer and tentatively approaches the door. He exits to the side of the army of Olympus led by Agamemnon, who points his sword toward him, the criminal Hephaestus. Hearing his name, the army get nervous, but their leader says Arenka's power is restricted on the 1st floor. Still, his strength is more than enough to shake them up, and he tells them to shut it and come at him. Agamemnon in turn insults him as a cripple and says that they brought a ranker of their own, as Chryseis, an Olympus high ranker under Apollo, steps up. The two high rankers face off, one with a thunderous hammer and the other a fiery spear. Hephaestus grits his teeth and unleashes his strength, creating chaos and destruction in the town. The head-on clash of these two rankers decimating the surrounding buildings and players from the sheer force. In the midst of their intense clashes, Chryseis reveals that he respected Hephaestus for being true to himself, and he doesn't really want to fight him, but still comes forth with his spear, resulting in a clash that erupts with an enormous explosion of power. The smoke clearing to show the half-petrified state of Hephaestus thanks to the shield now in Chryseis' hand, the replica of the Aegis shield that Hephaestus had created, sealing him in stone. Agamemnon then tells his men to drag away his body, when Yuan appears and refuses to allow that, one of the soldiers losing their leg to Yuan, who stares them down with blazing fury in his eyes. Agamemnon asks what he's doing, as Yuan thinks that their actions must mean they really need the old man for their gigantomachia. Yuan stands in front of the old man, who already shows signs of lifting the petrification, to which Agamemnon tells the army to kill Yuan and bring the criminal. When one of them hesitates because of the penalty for killing new players, he takes off his head and states, "What of it?" The rest then charge in to kill Yuan. Yuan infuses his sword with the colossal fire and sends out fiery slashes, burning them and blowing them away. Next, he uses Cinder Eyes to analyze the path and swiftly moves through them, dispatching those on his way. Yuan then raises his hand and forms a mana blast to counter the one bearing down on him, the collision resulting in an explosion of magic power. Yuan calls them weak as he asks if they think they'll win with numbers alone, whilst the rest surround him. Agamemnon shaken at the insane ability of a new player. This time Yuan incinerates them with the skill Fire Pillar, as they scream in agony. Yuan grits his teeth as he continues to wait for the old man, when he barely resists Sun Shard, an attack from Chryseis, who has stepped forward and questions why a customer is jumping into this. Yuan thinks he is indeed a ranker despite the penalty, so he can't lower his guard. With his sword put away, he activates Gigantification as Chryseis walks toward him, with his spear emanating fire. He launches the spear of fire at Yuan, who attempts to face it head on, only to fail to resist the Sun Shard and be inflicted with burn. The flames then come to swallow him, and he fires 3 mana blasts to counter, but the fire morphs to evade them and washes over him like a tidal wave. Coming out the other side, his burn has been increased to level 2 as he gasps for air, whilst Chryseis suffers from the backlash of the penalty. Yuan tries to use Gigantification again, but in the next moment, Chryseis punches him in the chest and sends Yuan flying into a building, before throwing up blood from the penalty. In the wreckage of the building, Yuan thinks he may have underestimated him, then smiling as he spots the refined, pure dark divine crystal. Meanwhile, Chryseis is thinking back on Apollo's warning, of how great the power of the tower is. He can't help but agree as the weight of the penalty has left him on his last legs. Then, as Agamemnon goes to collect Hephaestus, thinking it's over, the building behind him explodes. Yuan re-entering with the crystal in one hand and his sword in the other. When Agamemnon steps up, Chryseis stops him. He warns him not to take him lightly as his mana has the dark element and he is dangerous. However, Agamemnon brushes him off and says he'll deal with it since he looks tired. Yuan then disappears and takes out 2 more soldiers before Agamemnon can react. Yuan, appearing next to the old man, checks to see he will soon break free. As the army regroups, he concentrates his mana into the stone and releases a pulse of dark element mana, which seems to drain their souls, incapacitating them. The observing Chryseis smiles at the scene of a new monster entering the tower, to Agamemnon's annoyance. However, Chryseis ignores him and heads back toward the fight, whilst Yuan continues the onslaught. Yuan's mana of the fire and dark element fill the atmosphere as Chryseis approaches. Chryseis impressed even further at his ability to control 2 elements, which is hard even for rankers. He then expresses this to Yuan and invites him to join them, but Yuan replies that's undoubtedly not my goal. He asks in turn if he can keep fighting like this, and Chryseis responds with a chuckle that a new player would say such words, summoning a massive fireball as he internally thinks that someday he may brag about how he faced Kim Yu-won when he was on the first floor. That is, if they survive this. Yuan reads his intent to kill or be killed, surprised at how desperate he is to take the old man. The two clash in a massive battle of mana as Yuan thinks he must hold on to prevent the tragedy that another Gigantomachia would bring. Chryseis then launches the fireball with all his strength, whilst Yuan draws on the rest of his strength as he compliments Chryseis to the latter's surprise. Subsequently, an enormous explosion of fire and mana swallows the surroundings. In the aftermath, Yuan appears unconscious with Chryseis on the floor, suffering the penalty. Agamemnon laughs as he sees that it's finally over, but is cut short when Hephaestus strikes him. He tries to crawl to escape, but Hephaestus says, unlike the others, he will definitely kill him. He loads his next strike with immense power. However, the strike is blocked by the administrator of the first floor, who tells him he's far too enraged. The administrator tells Hephaestus that if he wants the fight to go up, but Hephaestus states he didn't want the fight. The administrator then places a spell on Agamemnon that forces him to tell Zeus that the admin will pluck his beard if he tries this again, whilst Hephaestus watches on satisfied with the perfect loss of Olympus. If you enjoyed the vid, like, sub, and comment below. Peace.